Hi, I'm Jere Palazzolo, president and founder of Catholic Healthcare International, and I'm here with a good friend and associate, Robert Muise. He is the principal of the American Freedom Law Center, and Robert is representing us in a very important case for us and frankly for religious liberties in our country. Rob, you want to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Great. It's great to be with you, Jerry. Yeah, I'm Rob Muise with the American Freedom Law Center. I'm the co-founder and senior counsel. American Freedom Law Center is a nonprofit public interest law firm. Our tagline is fighting for faith and freedom. So our principal issues that we deal with are freedom of speech and religious liberty, which are directly related. And just briefly on religious freedom, right? Because I know the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops this upcoming week is Religious Freedom Week. And it's important. And it goes back to our very founding as a nation. George Washington famously said in his farewell address that religion and morality are the indispensable supports to our political success. Our political prosperity is dependent upon them. Religion and morality are necessary conditions for the preservation of a free government. So when we talk about religious freedom, it's not only necessary for man as an individual, but for the collective good of society as well. So that's why we're a nonprofit public interest law firm. The cases we do are in the broader public interest. I know we're going to be talking about the case specifically, the one with Catholic Healthcare International. And while it's obviously defending their right to religious freedom and their right to religious liberty, it's in fact protecting all of our rights to religious freedom and religious worship. And St. John Paul II, there was a recent reflection or meditation that he wrote that I read last week, and it just seemed so appropriate. And the title was Freedom from Sin, Freedom for the Good. And this is what St. John Paul II, how he began this meditation. He said, "What is the ultimate source of the inner division of man? His history of sin begins when he no longer acknowledges the Lord as his creator and himself wishes to be the one who determines with complete independence what is good and what is evil. You will be like God, knowing good and evil," quoting from Genesis. This was the first temptation, and it is echoed in all the other temptations to which man is more easily inclined to yield as a result of the original fall. And when you think about that, and you think about where we are today as a nation, and what's going on with the progressive left and how this attack on the human person, on the image and likeness of God. I mean, it's really he points to at base, really at bottom, this fight is a spiritual battle, right? It's a spiritual battle between good and evil. There's no way in my mind to rationalize what we're seeing happening in this nation from a legal perspective, from a logic perspective, from a science perspective. It is just pure evil that is operating out here. And the response to evil is to turn to God, to turn to our Lord in prayer. And that's why religious freedom is so, we see in things dissolve economically, and we see in things dissolve in our traditions, our schools, and so forth. The answer to all of that is prayer, because it's a spiritual battle and it must be fought at that level. And there's no other way to really explain what we're seeing before our very eyes. That's why it's so important to protect religious freedom at every chance, and including obviously the religious freedom of Catholic Healthcare International.
That's an absolutely beautiful introduction and lead in, Rob, to what we're talking about today. Just a very brief background. Catholic Healthcare International has the honor and privilege of having the only collaboration agreement with a hospital that was built by a wonderful saint, Padre Pio, St. Pio of Pietrelcina, and it was built over in San Giovanni Rotondo, and it's called the Home for the Relief of Suffering, and it's actually a Vatican-owned hospital. And we have a collaboration to replicate that here in the United States as a model of truly faithful Catholic healthcare delivery. We are also developing a school for the relief of suffering, College of Osteopathic Medicine, to form Catholics to become good, faithful Catholic physicians in our culture of death. And it really is, everything that we're fighting here right now really is a battle of good versus evil. It is not person to person. Satan is having a field day right now, and it is all coming to a culmination. And it's very important that we fight for our religious liberties. Now, Padre Pio, before he built his hospital, he said the foundation of the success of the CASA, the Home for the Relief of Suffering, would be the foundation of international prayer. So before he ever built a hospital, he built an international network of Padre Pio prayer groups. And there are actually 3,500 of them around the world now. We are following the same model. It's so important, as Rob said, you fight evil with prayer. And all of our leadership, Cardinal Burke, Father Francis, who's the head of the Padre Pio prayer groups in the United States, all said that we will be attacked. And the only way that we can succeed, and we will succeed because the victory is already won, but the only way you can do it is through a foundation of prayer. So we did a few things before we ever really got going on our hospital and our medical school, which, by the way, are moving along very nicely. We developed the first International Eucharistic Adoration Program. We have over 300 hours of people sitting in front of the Eucharist, the real presence of Jesus Christ, around the world in their own communities each week, praying for us and the work that we're doing. How powerful is that? We have 3 Padre Pio prayer groups in the Diocese of Lansing, where Bishop Boyer welcomed us and embraced our mission to come and develop and build our mission in his diocese with his support. So 3 new Padre Pio prayer groups there. And the real culmination of it all is 40 acres of land that Bishop Boyer gave to Catholic Healthcare International in his diocese to develop a prayer campus. And that is what we have done for the last couple of years. We've taken this property and we have built 4 amazing prayer trails on it. We have a mural wall that is a replica of the mural behind the altar over in San Giovanni Rotondo, Italy, where Padre Pio said Mass every day, of Our Lady of Grace. We have a large bronze statue of Padre Pio. We have the Stations of the Cross. It is a wonderful, beautiful prayer campus. We went to get approval to be able to continue on with this and develop and to build a chapel, because the culmination of the prayer campus is going to be a St. Pio Eucharistic Adoration Chapel, which will be a replica of the first chapel that was there when he arrived in San Giovanni Rotondo back in the early 1900s. And it's going to have Eucharistic presence 24/7, constantly, perpetual. And that is going to be the culmination of our prayer campus. This prayer campus is so important to the work that we do. And without it, we cannot succeed in what we're doing. Unfortunately, the community around us, again, the fight of good versus evil, has really stood up in opposition to what we're doing. Again, a quiet, simple prayer campus where we want to gather to pray and worship together. And they caused such an uproar that the township, the Genoa Township, refused our application to continue on in the development of our prayer campus and to build our chapel. And that's where Rob came in. And Rob does such important work. The American Freedom Law Center, it is a pro bono, non-for-profit law center that takes on cases like ours, which we could not afford to fight. And we have to fight these cases. We have to stand up in the confident hope that the Holy Spirit and the power of good will overcome if we allow them to, if we take the steps to move forward. So Rob very generously stepped in and said, I will take on this case for you. And Rob has been working in support of us for, I believe, Rob, probably a year and a half now, fighting the case, and we will prevail because the victory is already won. But we couldn't do it without Rob, and he is a blessing to us. And Rob will tell you the details of what we're involved in.
Yeah, I'd say it's complicated in a way procedurally, but it is actually, in my view, a relatively straightforward and simple case. And it's a simple case of an egregious violation of the right to religious freedom under federal law in particular. So we filed after they submitted their special application for land use, which is a very burdensome and costly process to get land use approval for this, what is really a modest chapel and a prayer campus that's going to be maintained as a rural property. I believe they're only building on 5 acres of the 40-acre property, with prayer trails and very modest parking, like 39 parking spaces. And the city's own park on 38 acres, just a few miles away, they have over 200 parking spaces. So just to give you an idea in contrast. Well, the Planning Commission and the township's experts that they hired to review the application that was submitted all approved it. Right? It was approved by the Planning Commission. It was approved by the township's consultants. It was approved by the road commission, and then it went to the township board. And there was a vocal local opposition to this, and quite a few were expressing what could only be described as anti-Catholic sentiments in their opposition. And the township denied it. Shockingly, they denied the approval to build this prayer campus, forcing us to have to file a federal civil rights lawsuit. They would have preferred not to do this. They would prefer that the township actually approved the land use, which it should have. And so we sued in federal court. Meanwhile, while that case was going on, the township went to a local state court judge and got a temporary restraining order to have them remove the Stations of the Cross, the mural wall, and the altar, which was, small, modest religious displays, fully protected by the First Amendment. In the interim, we fought that, and that's on appeal to the Michigan Court of Appeals. And meanwhile, we're trying to get an injunction issued on the federal court side while this case proceeds to allow them to again engage in religious worship, because this TRO from the state side from the state court doesn't even allow them to engage in religious worship. They can't even engage in organized gatherings, which is a quote from this judge's order. And it's really one of the most egregious violations of religious liberty that I've seen. And this has been multiple motions. We've gone up to the Sixth Circuit, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit on the federal side. When our federal judge denied our request for a preliminary injunction the first time, that was remanded for the court to reconsider, and we're waiting for the new judge to now reconsider. But the bottom line, there's a federal statute that speaks directly to issues like this. It's called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, right? Typical for a federal law, has these long names. The acronym is RLUIPA. You may have heard that term before. But RLUIPA applies to any application of land use that substantially burdens religious exercise. And I don't know how you not conclude that the enforcement of a zoning ordinance that prevents you from engaging in religious worship and religious exercise is not a substantial burden. We're not talking about an indirect burden. We're talking about a direct prohibition. I can't imagine a more substantial burden on religious exercise. Once we show that, it's the government's burden to satisfy what under the law is called strict scrutiny. Strict scrutiny is the most demanding test known to constitutional law, and it's incorporated as part of this federal statute. So they must have a compelling interest, and that is narrowly tailored to prohibit this. And there's just no basis in law or fact to conclude that. And also related to that is their rights under the free exercise clause and the free speech clause of the First Amendment, because we're involved here not only with religious exercise, but religious expression through the display of religious symbols and through religious worship itself is protected not only by free exercise clause, but also by the free speech clause. And it's a long grind, and justice on the civil side is often slow. And I explained that to Jere going on. I mean, sometimes these cases take us 5 years to get all the way through. And oftentimes, we don't get favorable rulings at the lower court level, at the district court level, and you have to appeal. And we've had great success on the appellate level in these cases. And quite frankly, if we have a decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, that'll have actually broader impact than it would just a decision from a district court judge. Now, we certainly want to win in the district court, but I like our chances all the way up. And it's just been, it's when one roadblock after another, one brief after another, one delay after another. But you know what? And I think it was Cardinal Burke who explained to Jere when St. Padre Pio is is the patron saint of all this, that you can expect that there's going to be some persecution, because we all know, those of you who do know, of the history of Padre Pio. He was persecuted, and not only by the secular authorities, but also those within the church as well. He suffered a great deal of persecution but he persevered, right? Pray, hope, don't worry, I believe was his tagline. And that's what we got to continue to do. We got to pray, we got to hope, and just continue our work to fight for religious freedom. And it's going to be a long battle ahead, but it's a battle that's absolutely worth fighting, and we're committed to fighting.
Thanks, Rob. It's an honor to be called to do the work that we do, for Rob to do the work that he does. But obviously, as you know, and the very first time I met with Father Francis, who's the head of the Padre Pio prayer groups here in the United States, he called me back when I was getting ready to leave, and he said, "Jere, you're doing the work of Padre Pio, like Rob said. Padre Pio was a man of persecution, and he was a man who Satan fought physically, literally physically fought with him. And he says, you will be opposed by Satan. You, your family, everything that is dear to you will be." And I think that's what we're seeing manifested now. We cannot lose sight of the fact that this is really not a battle against people. This truly is a battle of good versus evil, of the power of God versus the power of Satan and evil. And God, we know he's already won the victory. The battle is already won, but we've got to be his instruments and allow him to do it. We couldn't do it without Rob. Rob, you're just an absolute blessing. I would encourage anyone, please support Rob in the work he does. We haven't paid Rob a penny. And honestly, this is what happens, I think, in many of these cases, is people like us can't afford to fight these cases. But Rob gives us the opportunity. So it's a blessing to do this work. It's a blessing to fight this battle. I know we will prevail. This prayer campus, this is the important culmination that's going to support the building of the hospital and the medical school and all the other work we do. So please pray for us, pray for Rob, and pray for the church, because the church is in a big battle, and our country. Pray for our country, and we will overcome, and Mary's Immaculate Heart will triumph, and God will prevail. So thank you all. God bless you all. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Jere.